All right, good afternoon and welcome to John Box Watercolor. Today we're going to be painting a scene from Mallorca, Spain, but before we get started, if you wouldn't mind giving this video a thumbs up, and if you like what you see, consider subscribing. I'm going to have 3 to 4 new videos posted each week. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put our reference photo in the top right-hand side of your screen so you can take a look. I've kept my sketch pretty true to form here. We've got 2 umbrellas, we've got our little back awning here. I've added 2 people off to the side, but basically we're gonna be abstracting a lot of activity and individuals and characters and things under these umbrellas. Now, I will say that when we get into this painting here, we're going to be actually darkening these buildings in the background. I'm gonna want these umbrellas to really pop out, and I can't do that if I've got a building in the background that's directly in light with umbrellas that are directly in light. Remember, with watercolor, we're always looking for that contrast. So you kind of have to make some decisions about what you want to stand out. So we're going to be darkening the buildings and making sure to negatively paint these from our first wash, but we'll get into that here in a second. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wet my palette. Go ahead and activate these pigments. Okay. We'll throw a little water on the paper as well. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to keep my sky fairly cool, and I want to keep it fairly light as well. To help maintain that light, I'm going to go ahead and just throw some dirty water up here towards the sky area. And let's go ahead and start mixing up a cool tone here. Got a little cobalt blue, a little lavender. We'll probably stick mostly to that cobalt there and keep it very light. Now, I mentioned that we're going to be darkening those buildings, and even though we're going to be doing that, I still want them to have somewhat of an appearance of light, and so I'm going to do that by trying to keep everything fairly light in our painting here. All right. So sky looks good, just a very light blue wash. We wet that paper and we'll kind of let that do the work for us. I do want to go ahead and throw just a little paint on a couple of these figures down here. I'm going to grab some lavender because I want to negatively paint around some of these individuals later. I think specifically we'll do one there, and we'll do a warm color. Something over there. Okay. All right, we're going to keep working down. Now we're going to be painting these buildings in our second wash, so I'm not too concerned about tones and things down here or colors. I'm just keeping it fairly light. I'll be going over them again. However, when we get down here, these umbrellas are going to be fairly powerful here. I'm going to pull some orange out, and that's a little bit too dark. I want to keep them light, but I want that color to be there because when we negatively paint around this, that's what's really going to pop and help give that contrast and interest that we're looking for in our watercolor. I'll just pull that through there. All right, nice and easy. I'll be careful to paint around those figures that I was gonna negatively paint around, and we'll just keep working our way down here. I'm gonna leave a couple little white spots just to maybe add some interest later on, and then I'm gonna paint a fairly warm foreground. We'll grab a little yellow ochre, a little burnt sienna, and we'll pull that there. That looks nice. And we'll keep working our way down. As we get closer to the bottom of our paper, we'll get darker and cooler. Okay. Warm that up just a little bit. And I'm grabbing, these are just some, this is a warm gray, a neutral gray, and neutral tint. Got some ultramarine blue there. And we'll just keep working our way down. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm gonna take my paper towel here and just dab maybe a couple of areas here just to help maintain a little bit of light. Okay, all right, our first wash is done. We're gonna let this dry and we're gonna come back and start on wash number 2. All right, we are back. This is now completely dry and we are going to be starting our second wash. So I've kept things, this first wash is very light, which is excellent to help us kind of maintain some brightness in the painting. And I mentioned that we are going to be painting these buildings here. We're not going to be leaving them quite as bright as the reference photo. However, I'm going to try to warm them up just a little bit to give just a tiny bit of impression that there's at least some kind of light and warmth on them. I'm going to spray my paper though here just to keep it moist. All right, and I'm going to keep working through here. I'm going to try to neutralize this just a little bit. It's maybe just a touch too warm, I think. And again, if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that we need to be working quickly. We need to be leaving some flecks of light and breaks within our buildings just to kind of add that little bit of interest. Makes it a lot easier on us. We don't have to paint every little thing. I'm gonna mix up some darker colors here just to kind of throw on this roof line. Something like that. And keep working our way down. Now I can already tell, I think this is gonna be too light. And so if you've already gone in and painted, sometimes it can be tough to use your brush to darken something if you've already got it wet with paint and water. I'd like to use my brush and just kind of touch and drop in that darker pigment rather than having to fight through it. I think it makes it just a little bit easier. All right, we'll keep working. Yeah, and that's a little bit darker. I think that looks much better. It still may be too light because again, with watercolor, this is all gonna dry much lighter. Give it just a little bit of a spray so that we're keeping our painting alive, giving it the moisture it needs to run and kind of melt together. All right, let's warm that up. We're just working our way down here. Okay. I'm gonna try to maybe put some windows on this front facing area. And we'll do that by just cutting them out and leaving that negative space there. Okay, now we're getting down to those umbrellas, so I gotta be really careful. They're gonna end up being somewhat the star of the show here. All right, that's a little bit too blue. Let's see. Okay, that looks good. All right, now as we bridge to the left here, I'm gonna just pull some water over and let it just bleed over there. I wanna be able to create some depth here, and I'm gonna do that in a moment by using both that water. I'm just dipping my brush into my water pail here and kind of dragging it through. I'll use my paper towel later on too to blot out and kind of get that misting effect. Just helps add some depth to our painting. All right, let's do this one here. Pull that back. And I'm just making some vertical lines so that I can pull across and maybe have some more windows there. Something like that. Warm it up. And again, always moving quickly here. You can tell when confident brush strokes have been made, and you might personally not be very confident, but what I mean by confident is you're moving with energy, and it will help your art kind of take on a mind of its own. I'm gonna dot this roof line here, mix up something a little bit darker. We're just gonna tap along there and let that kind of bleed down. I'm gonna spray this again, always being aware that we need to keep the painting wet and alive to be able to work it. I'm gonna take this paper towel and I'm gonna kind of mist that back area there to give the illusion of depth, you know, kind of running down the alley. Maybe I'll put a little bit in that top corner there. Just helps add a little bit of interest. All right, let's do the same thing up here, something like that. Okay, we're going to be adding some details within the buildings as well here in just a moment. I'm going to grab, we've got one more building here kind of on this left side. And I think what I want to do is make a little bit of a statement with that building. And just, again, I'm thinking of a confident stroke here. I want to see if I can do it in just a couple of strokes and just pull the brush straight down, let a few gaps of light be in there. Yeah. It needs to be a little darker than that. Okay. That looks pretty good. Keeping our paper wet. All right, now I'm gonna mix together a warmer color that I wanna try to work some windows in with here. And I'm just gonna dot the tops of where some windows might be and see if it'll run down and do some of that work for me. Now, I'm just looking at this, have to come in and do a little bit something else here, but for now, I'm okay with it. All right. And pull some lines there. Okay. Again, just giving that a little spray. Okay. Now, we've built up the upper part of our painting here. We're coming down to these umbrellas. This is where we're going to have to start picking and choosing where we want to paint and where we want to leave that light. Okay, just going to add that little bit more interest there. Okay, maybe pull. I'm kind of pulling down from the top to kind of try to give the impression of light. But anyways, all right, now let's start working down here. Let's warm it up. Let's throw a little orange in there and we're gonna try to make things exciting here. Let's do, how do we wanna do this? I'm gonna start by just making some abstract, just blocks down here. And from that, we're gonna start building in figures, and I also wanna add a shadow here as well. Now, we've got a lot of warmth going on. I wanna throw in a cooler color for the shadow down here. All right, maybe something like that. Okay. Let's try to neutralize it a little bit. And just pull that straight through. All right. Okay, it's not too bad. I think that's got a nice look to it. All right. I'm gonna pull some darkness under that umbrella back there, or I shouldn't say umbrella, it's more of just a, I guess, an awning. All right, looking to vary my tones and colors within that. I'm really just trying to abstract things here, make my life a little easier if I don't have to actually paint it. I'm working to paint around that figure. Yeah. Right, like that. Again, pulling some strokes through there. All right. And we'll just cover that. We'll just pull some water there. Okay. This is starting to come along here. Now, you can see how abstract this is. There's really no figures or anything in there yet. What I'm planning on doing is I think we're gonna let this dry, and then from there, I'm gonna come back and start building in those figures and getting those really dark darks. Now, one thing I wanna do before I let that dry though is I do need to add just a few things for these windows here. I'll try to keep them somewhat simple, but I want to do it while this is wet so that it'll kind of bleed into the building here. A couple of marks. Again, just trying to stay very loose. Okay. I think this is good for now. I'm gonna let this dry. We're gonna come back, do the bottoms of our umbrellas, start working in our figures and get some more shadows and details. All right, so stay tuned. All right, we are back again and we're ready to start the fun stuff. We're gonna start adding in some figures and adding in some fairly dark paint. So I wanna be careful with how much water I'm bringing into my palette. I wanna keep things pretty dark and thick here, but I'm gonna just start abstracting in some dark figures and just some things going on back in here. All right, let's add some red. I need to neutralize that a little bit. You gotta be careful when you're painting. Colors are, I see this a lot with beginners, but colors in the real world are always more neutral than you would expect. All right, pulling some lines here. I'm expecting to have some tables and things underneath this umbrella scene. But before I get to that, I just remembered, I'm gonna take just plain water here. And what I'm gonna do is wet the bottom of the paper where the umbrellas are. And what I want to do is I want to have some type of a vibrant, let's see how that looks there. I want to let that bleed up into the umbrella to create the effect of a shadow, essentially. You know, it's going to be darker underneath those umbrellas, and so I want to take that water and see if it'll just softly move some dark paint up for me. Let's try that again. I don't think we quite matched that tone well enough. It's a little too dark. I'm gonna take some water and just wipe the top of that. I'm just gonna wipe along there. That looks much more subdued. Just tap that a little bit, okay? Let's get a darker version of that and really just come right along the bottom here. Again, always looking for that contrast. We've got the darkest part of our umbrellas right next to the lightest tone on our paper, which is right underneath here. Always like to see that. Let's pull some vertical lines there. Perfect. Okay, now we're starting to build up here, but you start to see how all these little abstract things start to lead us into something that's very realistic and presentable. Again, I'm still just working in abstract shapes here. I'm pulling horizontal lines to represent the tops of tables. And here in a moment, I'm going to pull some vertical lines for chair legs, table legs, all that good stuff. All right, but let's start working on some people here. I've got some lavender here. I'll grab some burnt sienna. I typically will use burnt sienna for the faces on most of my figures. This here needs to be a person as well. We'll grab some burnt sienna. Maybe we'll stick a dinner jacket here around this individual. Okay, oops, little drop of water, that's no big deal. Grab my brush, or my paper towel. Okay. Let's just keep working. I'm really just looking for blobs that look kind of like a person, and if I throw some little heads on them, all of a sudden you've got a little dinner party. All right, let's grab some of that. All right, just working here. Working. Okay, that looks pretty busy under there. I like to see that. That looks good. I'm going to darken underneath this umbrella just a touch again while it's still wet. Okay. I'm going to pull some more horizontal lines. All right, let's add some legs on a few of these figures. Maybe this individual is coming away from lunch. She just finished. I have a waiter or something there. All right, let's do some vertical lines. Again, I'm being very abstract here. Not everybody's going to have legs or, you know, plates and dishes. That's the thing I see a lot of beginners do, is they come in and they try to draw every little detail like the Last Supper. You want to just get the gesture of what's going on. It will make your life a lot easier. Okay. All right, I've got this area looking pretty good. This is looking pretty barren over here. I'm gonna add just maybe some figures back there. We don't have any cars in this scene, so I need those figures to really kind of pick up the slack here. It's somewhat of a, I want to call it a boring choice, but it's really dominated by the figures. All right, let's work this front figure here. I want to try to keep him very light. I'm going to grab some Chinese white. I'm going to do just like that. Let that bleed in there. When you're doing the legs, you want to try to have somewhat of a drier brush. Oh, wow, I pulled that down way too far, but you know what? That's okay. You want to have a little bit of a drier brush. I like to have some breaks in their legs. I don't want to see these perfect lines, you know. It helps kind of give the impression of movement. All right, let's do this person to the left here. We'll do another lavender. Okay. And same thing again here. I'm reaching for a darker color for the legs. Trying to get something a little bit drier. And pulling it down there at an angle. Let's grab some burnt sienna. Okay. Now for this individual, let's give them maybe a vest. What I do is I'll come in here and just touch the brush where I want that paint to go. Maybe something like that. It kind of looks like they just have a lavender jacket on or something. Don't know, could be anything. Add a little hair. Yeah, just touching along here. Okay, those folks need shadows. Let's work on that. I'm gonna try my best to match this shadow here. This is too warm. That looks about right. I want to keep this fairly vertical. I want to keep these shadows a little bit slimmer to kind of give the impression of a higher position for the sun. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I'm gonna leave that alone. Okay, we've got our figures, we've got some umbrella action here. I think we're maintaining, despite the darkness of these buildings, there is a feeling of some light out here in the open. So I'm glad to see that. I'm gonna grab some warm color here and maybe just pull some kind of perspective lines. I just feel like things are a little bit open right now. And I want to try to just give it a little something. I'll clean that off. I may do this as well. I may just throw maybe some speckling down there, and then I like to smear it with my hand just to give some texture to the surface here. And let's go back underneath this awning here and add just a little something. We'll give it a shadow underneath there. And from here, we're kind of just slowly continuing to build our painting up. We've got to be careful, you know, you don't want to overwork things, but I just think it needs a little bit more. We're not quite there. All right, let's darken up some of these windows. Now, I've mentioned before, I like to do windows when things are still wet, just so they get that kind of bleeding in effect. And our, you know, unfortunately, our windows are very dry at the moment, but I have a little bit of a workaround here. What I like to do is you just make a dot where the top of your window should be, and then you can just take your finger and just pull it down slightly. And that one needs to be a little darker. Press a little hard. But I just think those windows need to be darkened, I mean, just slightly. Yeah. I think that looks better. Okay, just trying to soften them up a little bit. This building here needs a little bit of work. I'm gonna leave some of this. I'm gonna do just some dry brush on that building. Just some runners, maybe smear it a little bit. Okay, let's do some, I always like to put some things on the roof here. Little chimneys, wires, could be air conditioning units, all types of stuff. Oh, those are maybe a bit too tall, but that's okay. All right, let's throw some vertical lines in our background here. These could be poles. And the secret too, whenever you're doing lines, don't stick your brush and slowly draw. Oh, wow, I did not mean to do that. Drew right through our umbrella. Well, don't do that, but also don't move your brush slowly. You want to just flick and you'll end up with a much straighter line. I'm gonna just put some water there to blot that out. Perfect. No harm there. Let's see. Anything else I need to add? Maybe some really strong windows here. I don't know. I don't think that looks too bad. I am glad that we decided to speckle that building and kind of just let it open up a little bit. Just going for a little bit more power there, just to kind of pull it forward. Anytime you've got darker or sharper lines on something, generally it's going to pull it forward in the viewer's eye. Maybe just some directional lines for our buildings here. Yeah, I actually think that looks pretty nice. Okay, I think we're okay for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry. We're going to come back with our gouache and we're going to finish this painting up. All right, we are back and ready to finish up our painting. Now I've gone ahead, I've got my white titanium gouache here, and we're going to add some highlights on our figures and a few other things in our painting here. And all this does is it really just helps everything pop out a little bit and give that impression of light. All right. Throw it on a couple of shoulders, especially useful where you've got figures like that that are surrounded by darkness. Here's another one here. All right. I'll put a little there. This person has some large hair. Okay. That looks pretty good. I'm going to pull some vertical lines in here. Again, these are more, could be reflections off of glass tables. Throw in some vertical lines. Maybe just give some little highlights on tops of the umbrellas there. Let's see. I'll throw one on the edge of that gazebo. I don't want to get too carried away. It's hard not to, though. It's such an impactful medium in watercolor. Just it cuts through so nicely. I'll just drag that down. Okay, anything else I want to do? I may take and give this individual a little bit of a shirt there. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay, let's take a look. Last chance, forever hold your peace. Is there anything we want to add? Let's see. Get some dark paint. I can't decide. I think these windows just, they didn't quite come out the way I had hoped. Should I add some down there maybe? I don't know. Let's add one more thing just to add a little interest here. I'm gonna add some birds. And what we need to do, and again, this comes back to confidence in your brush strokes. I'm gonna just make a few dots in the sky. Ooh, that one, that'll be okay. It kind of looks like spread wings. You just need a few dots and then a couple of shapes that can be identified as birds, and it'll kind of fill in those dots to where people that are viewing this go, oh, those are just birds up there. And I'll throw some dots on this roof line so that maybe it just looks like there's some doves or pigeons sitting up here. Yeah, okay. I think that looks good. I think it just needed a little more action. We didn't do any clouds or anything here. So let's sign it and then we will review and see what we could have done better. Okay, and I've got that red on my brush. It's always hard to not come in here and add a tie or something. Yeah, we'll add one tie. All right. We wash the brush off and we will take off the tape. Overall, I think it's a pretty good painting. I think its weakest point actually is not anything to do with what was done on screen here, but I don't know if the subject is that interesting. I wish I would have pulled two figures a bit more forward, or at least with these two, maybe had them having a conversation facing each other just to make it a little more personal, because it's really just people walking around. We don't have any cars or anything, so it does have that, you know, kind of bustling feel to it, but I don't know. It's maybe just a little bit boring. I think the birds helped though. So I think the overall subject and the way it was presented could have been done a little bit better. Things I do like though, I think our umbrellas turned out great. This little under area with a lot of our abstractions and just filling in figures, I think it looks excellent. The tone of the shadow looks nice. Overall, very pleased with the painting. So if you stayed with me to the end, I really appreciate it, and I hope you learned something. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing, and remember to keep on painting. Thanks.